myself, but my name's Martin Cullip. I'm International Fellow of the Taxpayers Protection Alliance, and this is a panel we've convened. It's the third panel of a series we're doing on countdown to COP11 in advance of the COP11 meeting of the WHO in Geneva, and also our counter-conference, the Conference of the People, which the Taxpayers Protection Alliance is holding in Geneva for the same week as COP11. So this is kind of a lead-up, or a series of lead-up meetings to talk about issues in advance of that meeting. So this panel, we're going to talk about reform of the World Health Organization and the Framework Convention on Tobacco Control. I'd like to start with a quote from Dr. Jeremy Farrar, who's Chief Scientist of the World Health Organization. And he said, and I quote this, he said, "All organizations, whether they are a factory making widgets or a UN technical agency, have to be good at the core jobs. And if you strip away everything, what is the core of the World Health Organization? Scientific advice, technical guidance, and support for countries. And that core is critical, and science is critical to that." Now, we all know that the World Health Organization, when it comes to its FCTC treaty, doesn't adhere to the science. It cherry-picks its science. It misguides nation states. It misguides governments. And so that is something we feel that should be reformed. And reform has been spoken about a lot recently, not just by people like us, but by Dr. Tedros himself, who's the director of the World Health Organization. He's said this because for several years now we've had discussions about the WHO should be doing better and UN agencies should be doing better. And Dr. Tedros has said himself, when the US took their money away, we need to reform, we need to do things the right way. So we're saying, well, this is a good opportunity. If you're talking about reform, let's reform how you have your tobacco and nicotine policy. Let's reform how you operate your Framework Convention on Tobacco Control. So that's kind of what we're going to be talking about. I mean, some of the issues we have is that have been spoken about in the debate are inappropriate influence on member states, corruption, the failure of its policies, and also very dubious funding, as we are well aware of. So I'll introduce our panel. We have here, I'll see where they are. To my left, Ignacio Leiva. He's a journalist specialised in informatics and multimedia platforms. In 2010, he led the communication campaign to prevent the vaping ban in Chile. Since then, he has focused on strengthening the community of electronic cigarette users, making them more informed and aware. He's the founder and current president of the Association of Vaporizer Consumers of Chile, ASOVAPE, and serves as the secretary of ARDT Ibero-America. He organised the first pro-vaping public demonstration in Latin America and promotes communications campaigns for tobacco harm reduction in Chile and worldwide. And he was recently involved in a legislative process which concerned electronic cigarettes in Chile, which ultimately led to the enactment of Chile's vaping law, which came into force this year and is very, very good, by the way. So thank you for joining us. Next to me we have Nancy Lucas. Nancy's THR advocacy began in 2015 as one of the founders, co-directors of, you can read that. Are you going to make me read it? Aotearoa Vapers Community Advocacy. I wasn't going to try that. In New Zealand, doing battle for the rights of vapers to be able to access what they need to become and remain smoke-free. Nancy is also the executive coordinator for the Coalition of Asia Pacific Tobacco Harm Reduction Advocates, CAFRA, and CAFRA supports consumer THR advocacy organisations and activities throughout the Asia-Pacific region and beyond, and has developed various programmes for consumers, including Voices for Vape online seminar series, Scope Consumer Livestream, and the Advocates Voice online newscast, and the Advocates Voice live sessions. We also have Maria Papai Ioanoi is the founder and spokesperson of Rights for Vapers, Canada's largest movement advocating for access to safer nicotine products. She has led nationwide protests against restrictive policies, ensuring the voices of those who rely on on these alternatives are heard. Maria's advocacy began in 2014 with the Vapor Advocates of Ontario, and in 2019 she launched R4V to push back against government overreach. For over a decade, she has engaged with legislative bodies, public health units and media to challenge provincial and federal flavour bans. And in 2024, under her leadership, R4V collected and mailed over 100,000 letters to elected officials, marking one of Canada's largest consumer-led advocacy efforts. And here to my right is Tom Gleeson, who's a trustee with the New Nicotine Alliance Ireland. He first discovered e-cigs in 2011 and switched completely from a heavy smoking habit within a few days. As he watched regulation advance, he felt the voice of people like himself was not being heard. The NNA Ireland gives them that voice, and Tom is proud to serve as a trustee, and I echo that. And at the end of the table here, we have David Williams, who's the president of the Taxpayers Protection Alliance, the founder of our feast with the Good Cop, and our first event in February 24 was very, very successful, and we're hoping to do it again in Geneva, and he can tell us a lot about that as well. So welcome to the panel. I don't know where we start on that, but who wants to talk about reform first? Reform of the WHO. Maria, do you want to give us a kick-off on that subject?
I always find it interesting, because I find it very interesting that when you look at the countries that are part of FCTC, they have a lot different perspectives and a lot different rules in their own country. And all of a sudden, when they go to these conferences, they become different people, for lack of a better term. I live in a country where, and thankfully, access to harm reduction is constitutional. It's part of our Charter of Freedoms, unless you smoke. So we have fought so hard to ensure that harm reduction, and when we look at that harm reduction spectrum, that tobacco is included. And we've worked hard, and we've reached miles, like we're miles away from where we were. And then all of a sudden you go to, we're at Good Cop, Bad Cop, and I'm watching people I know not stand up for it. You see this small little country saying, let's bring in electronic cigarettes, let's look at tobacco harm reduction. And then Canada is zip silent. And it broke my heart, because I knew who these people were that were part of that delegation, and I knew that in their core, they believed what we all believed, that access to harm reduction products is important. And it broke my heart, and I remember sending an email and still not getting a response to that email. And then realizing that there are different rules, and I just think the hypocrisy of it all is, how can a nation not be themselves and be part of an organization? Isn't that the whole point of, we are only a community if we are different. We're not a community if we're the same. And different perspectives need to be brought in, and they don't allow that. And, and I know I've called for the removal of Canada from FCTC in a very bold way. But, maybe Canada just needs to stand up. Maybe New Zealand needs to stand up. Maybe those countries that are there who have broader, more progressive policies need to stand up. And maybe the change needs to happen from within.
Yeah, that brings me on to a subject. We'll get Ignacio in on this one, because we did see at the last COP, it was a bad COP for the World Health Organization. They didn't make any decisions really of note, and they did get a lot of pushback from some of the countries. I think there was something like 30 or 40, about 37, 38 countries who stood up and said, we'd like to incorporate harm reduction into our policies. And Chile, you've done that. You've got a fantastic law. Do you want to explain quickly about the law, and then what do you think you're going to expect from your Chilean representation when it goes to COP11?
Well, what we live in Chile was a very long fight. It was 6 years of non-stop fighting in the legislative process. And it was crucial, the participation of the civil society. We did a lot on that, and this is a call also to understand that the users must be used not only by the representative, they need to be seen. We made a lot of massive public manifestations in front of the Congress when they were discussing our project of law. At some moment at the beginning, we kind of faced the same that we're facing now in COP. We were not allowed to enter the discussion. So we call our people, I mean the people that vapes, and start sending emails, but also legal petitions for hearing, but not for the same person. They were all sent to hear the representative of the users, what led them not be able not to hear us. The first time we got 10 minutes, then our microphone was shut, and then we receive all the normal accusations that you know and are the same that are being used by COP. Users are always treated like part of the industry. What is very funny, in my case at least, as it was said at the beginning, I started advocacying on 2010. At that time, the industry was not part of the business. Actually, they were against the business because they were seeing on vaping a problem for the industry. So no one can come to me and say, you were produced by the industry, because I start even before that, and I can prove it. It's like, it happened. I was the first person to manifestate alone on public. There are pictures on 2012 and 2013. So at least I can block that just because I'm a dinosaur in this. But I know a lot of advocacies that have nothing to do with the industry. They have the same position than me. And that is something that is used everywhere, every time, to accuse us to be part of the industry. So the first thing is to show them that there is a lot of people behind you, that you're not someone that was created by the industry. You're representing a bunch of people, and that people need to let them know that you are the one speaking for them. In that first session, I was accused of a lot of things. I was even told by a senator that I was the new pedophiles of this century. So you can get that kind of stuff that it's like amazing in a public transmission, but it went well. So in the next round, when it was in the Chamber of Deputies, we were part of the discussion, and that was the moment to bring the science, to try to fight the heavy, sorry, I forget the word in English, but what the
Say in Spanish.
influence of Bloomberg in the politics. That was, I'm so sorry, but the heavy influence of in politics of Bloomberg and all his mafias that are everywhere. We have a lot of that. We have people from Bloomberg in the minister. As in many other countries, we have the case of Mexico, Filipinas, where the things were uncovered and they went well. We were able not to uncover them, but to go against what their lies and the same things that they always said. And I'm going this way because part of your question, Martin, was what do I think it will be the position of the delegates of Chile. Badly, I think the position won't change because it's not about legislation that it's placed by the Minister of Health in Chile and the Minister of Health, not the minister, the ministry, the whole staff. It's totally under Bloomberg's, I wouldn't say money, but at least in the speaking, the normalized that we know, they are totally bought on that with some people inside. So I'm pretty sure that it won't change, even if we have a very good law. We are very happy. We are celebrating. This is the first year that the law is it's working now, and we are seeing fast change in the market, but also in the users. So we're quite happy.
Can I just say something about Bloomberg? I just want everyone to know that my Prime Minister, Mark Carney, worked for Bloomberg. Bloomberg gave him a highly glowing recommendation for all of us to vote for him. So, yeah. So
I just want to add a little thing, just a little thing that you said that. The senator that called me pedophile of the new century during the process, he's not paid by Bloomberg, as far as we know, but he's the one to put all the laws that have to do with Bloomberg agenda. He was the first one to go against sugar in Latin America. That went very well for them. Then he went against vaping. He was the one that presented the law. That's something that I didn't tell, but the first law that was presented in Chile was a law that was actually forbidding electronic cigarettes. It was trying to avoid electronic cigarettes to be on, and there is a way to fight. If you go with your people, if you keep fighting and you don't stop, there are very long process, in our case 6 years, you can finally avoid that. And we came from a law that was forbidding electronic cigarettes to a very good law that we're very proud, and I might say that might be one of the best law actually in the world. It's that good.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. We will talk about Bloomberg. Don't worry, I've got a note down. We'll move on to that. But yeah, it is a fantastic law. Thank you very much for Chile. It is the best in the world. It's better than even the TPD was when it was the first rules that separated smoking from vaping. So it's fantastic what you've achieved. So thank you for that. We'll go on to you, Nancy, next with New Zealand, because New Zealand has taken over from the UK, really, with its decent policies in some respects. I mean, they're talking about maybe rolling back the nicotine pouch ban. They're talking favourably about vaping. What do you expect from your country and its interactions with the FCTC and WHO?
Okay, well, our Associate Minister of Health, Casey Costello, has come out and said that the delegation, they haven't chosen it yet, which is a bit odd, but they have till July, the delegation will be there to represent the views of New Zealand. And she was very firm about that. Now, right now in New Zealand, they are in a technical advisory committee phase regarding oral nicotine pouches. It was part of the coalition government agreement in order to form a government that it would be regulated by the end of this year. They're in the committee process with that now. But in saying that, it seems, to me anyway, it seems like we have to do 2 steps forward and 1 step back. And a lot of it's political, and a lot of it is relevant to Mr. Bloomberg and his operatives. I like to use the word operatives. And it's the same script, which I think was the word you were looking for, Ignacio. They follow a script, okay? And the script is still very much focused on youth. It's very much focused on the mis-mal, and disinformation around nicotine. Now, in saying that, I think what we have in New Zealand is very good. We fought hard for that too, but I'm also seeing cracks in it. You know, the trying to put the politically motivated appeasement of the anti-vape crusade. And this has led to us having, you know, vape shops that have to have frosted out windows, and you can't see any product from the street, and you can't have any pictures of products on the websites. And it's a backwards move, because a lot of people, I mean, I know when I started a bazillion years ago, there was one website that we had, and you'd go on there and you'd be able to look at it and be able to do research and be able to find out information. And that's kind of being throttled right now with the regulations that just came in. But as far as what is the delegation going to say, they're going to say what the government is pro harm reduction. They're going to go in there and they will say something about it, but I don't think they're going to be, you know, a standard bearer with a torch going, we got to do this. Because again, you know, we have to remember something. We think of the WHO FCTC as being, I don't know, not expert, but you would think that they would have health as the priority. But it's all political, really, in the end, and even with the ministries of health. This is all politics. This is all about getting votes. This is all about getting support. This is all about funding. I mean, the health comes in like right here when it comes down to it. And we're sitting here fighting for this, and they're doing this and this and this. The main concern I have with the FCTC, and New Zealand hasn't been that bad with this, thank God. But many governments, and I see it in Asia Pacific, is the weaponization of 5.3. Now, Article 5.3 comes up all the time. Can I go there with this? Yeah, and this really just twists my knickers. The weaponization of 5.3. Article 5.3 was put there in order to guarantee transparency with government interactions with tobacco companies. And what has happened, I would say in the last 7 years maybe, is it's become weaponized to prevent anybody who isn't part of the clique from having a seat at the table. Okay, it excludes consumers. It redefines civil society as their approved clique. And that's why Ignacio ran into the problems he ran into. That's why Maria runs into the problems that she runs into. The advocates in Asia, it's the same thing, okay? It's the weaponization of the treaty to exclude people. And that is in direct opposition to what that treaty is supposed to be doing. And that's something that all of us fight with. Thank you for letting me say that.
No, that's fine. Yeah, I'm sure weaponization of 5.3 will come up again. Just for people who's watching who don't know what that is, Nancy's described it perfectly. It's an article of the FCTC treaty which is designed to stop the tobacco industry interfering in decisions of governments, but has been taken to basically just close down any sort of debate. And people like us at the panel will not be allowed to the FCTC conference. They will find some reason to exclude us because that's just what they do. And David will talk about that later when it comes to the Good Cop conference. But I just want to, because I'm going to throw it back to you, because your remit is not just New Zealand, of course, you're Asia Pacific as well. Do you want to just give a more general account of what's happening in those countries as well?
All right. Understand that Asia, if you don't know this already, Asia Pacific carries the majority of the burden for smoking and unsafe oral tobacco harm in the world. And because it's such a big region, we have a very diverse, different countries, different cultures, different rules. We have India. Let's talk about India for a minute. We were talking about this morning. In India, there's probably 325 million people who use tobacco. And of the 325 million people that use tobacco, 200 million of them are using oral tobacco, Gutka, Kalini, all those horrible oral things with slaked lime, okay? Only 100 million of them are smokers, okay? But yet, India, going back to the WHO, you knew this was going to happen, India has an India Tobacco Corporation. They get awards from the WHO. Maria reminded me of this today. They get, they're the golden child of the WHO. And meanwhile, they have tobacco interests. Same thing in Thailand, where there's a ban, although they're working on trying to reverse that right now. Indonesia, again, tobacco interests. And then we have Australia. Sorry, Fee, I'm bringing it up. So, Australia and New Zealand are separated by the Tasman Sea, and they're about a 3-hour flight away from each other. And you couldn't have two more diametrically opposed countries if you tried. Okay, we've got a regulated market. Meanwhile, Australia has a medical model, which isn't really a medical model, but the majority of people in Australia are getting their products on the black market, and that's not public health. Then we go over to the Philippines, where you've got Bloomberg tried to get in there and had his operatives trying to influence the creation of the policy. They got caught out. The senators all freaked out because they were like, we didn't want a foreigner coming in here making our policy. And now they have a regulated market as well. So when we talk about Asia Pacific, it's not a homogenous group. It's many different angles and many different cultures and many different perspectives. Pakistan, another example, right next to India. Pakistan has basically an unregulated market, but there's plenty of people that are using safer products. It's going well there. Meanwhile, India, everything's on the black market, just like Australia. So, it does boil down to policy. It boils down to a lot of these countries are looking for those kudos from the WHO, FCTC. A lot of these countries, if they have tobacco interests, are afraid of the impact of these products on their bottom line and their government coffers. And the majority of our advocates, we all sit and talk about it. It's like somebody speaking, one person could be speaking Swahili and another person could be speaking English, but somehow we all understand each other because we're all up against the same thing. And that's kind of the best way to explain Asia Pacific.
Yeah, thanks for that. I've got a couple of notes on this to explain, actually. On the Philippines, for example, in the Philippines, Bloomberg-funded groups were caught trying to influence government policy during the enactment of the vape law, as Nancy mentioned. They were caught writing policy to the government, which was against the constitution of the country. And in Pakistan, the national government suspended the activities of 2 international NGOs funded by Bloomberg, Tobacco Free Kids and Vital Strategies, due to several violations, and criticised its influence upon certain countries. Additionally, they ordered the state bank to freeze the bank accounts linked to these concerns because they were operating in the country without permission or any valid registrations. Now, this seems to me, the WHO, it's in charge of all these policies, but it's mismanagement. How can you have countries taking completely different views? So now we'll talk about Ireland, which, as far as I can see, is going down a terrible route. And what's the influence of the WHO there in Ireland with you?
Problem in Ireland is that the WHO writes a policy and Ireland just adopts it. They never check, has it ever worked before? Has it ever been tried before? We have a tobacco Free Ireland policy. It's a big, long document, and every year they report on how well it's working. The one figure that's never mentioned in any of those reports is the number of people smoking, because they don't care if it works. What they care about is they got policy X, and that one's passed, we're on to policy Y. When we get to policy Z, we'll expand policy A into 3 more subclauses and we'll move along. The whole thing was written before there were safer product alternatives. There was snus, but it had been banned in the EU, so it never really came on the radar. And they have never thought to change their policy as the options changed. They're just stuck. At this stage, the FCTC has become a millstone around tobacco control's neck. It should have anchored their aims to reduce the illness and the death from smoking. But instead, they are glued to implementing their set of policies. It's almost like they think the policy document is more valuable than the end result. And maybe it is, because Empower is a saleable template. We're already seeing it creeping in on alcohol, and anything that interferes with the control aspect, not the end results. The end results have become irrelevant. This year we had the ESPAS school surveys, and buried in the middle of it is the fact that in Ireland, smoking among school kids is 2%. Now, it's done every 2 years. I want to say it was 19% the previous 2 years. They may have changed the interview questions or something. But a drop like that, you'd think, would be the first thing for people fighting smoking. That would be the headline I'd be running with if I was in tobacco control. We are winning. Break out the champagne. They probably were going to have the champagne anyway, so there wasn't any need. Instead, they ran with the headline, "Vaping undermines smoking legislation." Gateway. It's a hell of a gateway if you're losing people out it. Maybe that's why they want to close it.
Yeah, I'll make a point on that. The FCTC treaty is an international treaty, and there are 3 principal aims of an international treaty. One is to be recognised all across the world. It's done that. It's 183 countries have ratified the treaty. Number 2 is to have influence on those countries, so those countries will initiate legislation based on what happens at the international treaty. We have that. They value and rate these Empower regulations, which is traditional tobacco control regulations like taxation bans, smoking bans. All those things are covered. But the one thing that the FCC doesn't do, which an international treaty does do, it doesn't analyse whether those policies are actually working. All it does, it has a report. It reveals every year how much of their policies have been taken up in these countries. It's never actually worked out, or even talks about whether those policies are getting people to reduce their smoking. And that's the whole point of the FCTC. The FCTC was written to reduce the harms of tobacco smoke, and now they've pivoted and turned their guns instead onto nicotine. And so they're arguably going against the terms of the FCTC, they're going against the terms of what international treaties are supposed to do, and so therefore they are ripe for reform, which is what we've been talking about. Now, I want to bring you on, David, I haven't warned you about this. The pressure on the WHO has become more prominent in recent months because of President Trump taking the money away from the US, and I think Argentina did it as well. What sort of impact do you think that's had? We've heard Dr. Tedros talk about reforming the WHO. I mean, what's your view of that as an American, how that's gone?
So what's happening with President Trump actually happened when he was president the first time. He took away funding from the World Health Organization. And my takeaways from that is it brought more attention to the World Health Organization and what they're doing incorrectly. Now, I know that, as a professional, I've been talking about the World Health Organization for the past 15 or so years. It wasn't until President Trump actually elevated the discussion in getting rid of the funding for the WHO, and I think that's what's happening again this presidency, is he's shining a light on the World Health Organization. So I think this is a very positive move. I know there are some there's some discussion as to whether this is a good or bad thing, that if you take away taxpayer funding and Taxpayers Protection Alliance, I think you can understand my concern is that taxpayer money is going to this entity. And listen, global taxpayers are paying for the World Health Organization, but if you take away taxpayer money, are people like Bloomberg and Gates going to have more influence in the World Health Organization? Listen, I think that's a very healthy debate to have as we move forward, especially this year with COP.
Yeah, I was going to talk about Bloomberg influence, actually, because there are a lot of concerns about how health bodies are influenced by Michael Bloomberg on all these organisations we mentioned before. He's been called a philanthrocolonialist, Michael. Philanthropic
colonialism.
Yeah. And the special interest groups he funds, and they drive prohibitive policies on less harmful nicotine alternatives. That's not what the FCT should be doing. It should be working with governments and advising governments with the best science. As we said at the start, Jeremy Farrow had said we should stick to the science, but they're not sticking to the science. So, I mean, is that a case for reform? Maria, do you want to talk about, is that a case where they should be reformed themselves? Or?
I think, like, if we're going to look at the FCTC and all these restrictive regulations, is that innovation didn't stop. No matter how hard they've tried to remove vaping, you know what we turned around and did? We got the pouches out. We have been pushing safer nicotine. So when we're talking about science, is that they should be looking at, you know, and it's not the tobacco companies that are pushing these new products, it's the tobacco companies that are buying out these new products, while people who smoke have found different ways to help themselves quit smoking and making it better. So the FCTC should be actually looking at all of us and saying to themselves, geez, we've done everything. We've thrown billions of dollars at these people to get them to either quit our way or continue to smoke, yet, damn it, they fucking figured it out. Let's be honest.
On their own.
On their own. None of these, whatever the FCT has been doing, has not stopped regulations. All these regulations that have, has not stopped innovation. All these regulations, and you know, just a couple of weeks ago, the antis, I've now called them the triad of trouble, did a press conference saying, we're not here to ban vaping, but we don't want flavors. We're not here to ban nicotine pouches, but you're only going to be able to get them under the careful guidance of a pharmacist. They know what they're doing. They're banning things, but you know, we know what we're doing. We're creating different products. Like, who knows what's after nicotine pouches? But what scares me the most is imagine where we would be if we all worked together, and imagine where we would be if the people at FCTC spent more time in helping people opposed to less time in shaming people.
Well, it's the stigma, okay? And this is something, we were talking about this earlier. When I look at the FCTC and I look at the way it's run and I look at the way they issue their quote-unquote guidance, which really comes across as a dictate, okay? It's a power and control thing, but I think it's also a fear thing, because I think a lot of these people realize that they're irrelevant now. So they're trying to hold on to whatever they possibly can to maintain their relevance. And this applies to the NGOs as well, because they get so much funding. I mean, a ridiculous amount of funding from the philanthropic colonial guys, that they need to maintain that. So it's gone beyond health, Maria. It's about power, it's about control, it's political. And we're the ones that are going to have to figure it out, just like we did in the beginning, of how we're going to take care and save our own lives, because we cannot depend on these people to do it for us.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, Ignacio, with Bloomberg in mind. I mean, you've got your law now, but I've heard from places like the Philippines, for example, they're going to have a vape law, which seems it could be quite favourable. But you still getting pressure like the Philippines is from the health authorities and from the WHO?
Sorry, again?
Are you still getting pressure from the WHO and from Bloomberg funded interests?
We are not only getting pressure, the pressure is even harder and harder, because they clearly lost in Chile. Even with all the millions of dollars that they received, they were not able to go through what they wanted. And we are seeing a huge attack with the same things, Sabali and all that, that they said. So yeah, and in concerning with the treaty, and Bloomberg, there is something that we haven't talked about it, that it's not only how he have tried to manage the things on the countries. In the case of the CTMCT, Bloomberg have a very big problem, and the CMCT have a very big problem, that he's founding both NGOs. He found the WHO department that it's in charge of COP, but also he's actually a global ambassador for non-communicable disease of WHO, but also he also found Tobacco Free Kids, Vital Strategy, the Union, and Stop. So what's going on here? Why the people let someone that clearly it's involved in the situation, that he have his own agenda, to become both parts? He's just the one talking inside and outside, using, as you said, weaponizing the 5.3, but there is not only a problem with the 5.3, excluding of users. It's a violation of the spirit of the treaty. In the Article 4.7, it said exactly this: the participation of civil society is essential, and they are going against that article. Also, harm reduction is explicitly included in the treatment. In the Article 1, letter D, it said tobacco control includes demand, supply, and harm reduction. But because of Bloomberg, they are totally against harm reduction. And also, there is another article they are totally going over, that it's the Article 14 and 26, because they have ignored every successfully harm reduction case. Japan, England, furthermore, Chile, Sweden, they totally don't talk about it. So it's not one article. They go against the treaty all the time. You have also the founding COP's legitimacy, because it's also in 5.3. It's not only about tobacco. 5.3 also talk about outcomers. So it's kind of, we're fighting with a person with a lot of money, but with a lot of stupid people. It's the only thing that I could say, that if I was Bloomberg, I will try to really, if we are that cheap, because he accused us to receive money and doing this for money for the tobacco companies, he's spending a lot of money. I still don't have a Ferrari. He could have bought me 3 Ferraris, and he's losing it. Just last year, he put $150 million only in Latin America to be used against vaping. So maybe he is investing in the wrong people.
I love the fact we've got a knowledgeable panel, because they keep talking about points I've had notes down here on before I get to it. But we'll talk about that, Article 1D.
Can I ask a question about this Bloomberg fella?
Yeah, go ahead.
Like, I just don't understand how much of an ego someone could have. Like, I get that he's got like billions of dollars, but it's like, this is what I want for the world to do, so I'm going to pay for it.
Yep, he's a megalomaniac.
And that should concern governments, not get them excited. like, I mean, isn't that some sort of like weird cult-like thing?
Hold on, let me talk about Article 1D. Yeah, it's a very good point. I don't know the answer to that, but Article 1D, just to explain, is where it's part of the treaty that it's meant to include harm reduction as a method for helping to quit smoking. That's in the treaty, and that's an immutable part of the treaty. It can't be altered, because that has been ratified by 183 different countries, but the FCTC ignores it. And I just want to wind back 10 years to, well, nearly 10 years, COP7, which was in India in 2016. And one of the decisions they made was, they said if the great majority of tobacco smokers who are unable or unwilling to quit would switch without delay to using an alternative source of nicotine with lower health risks, this would represent a significant contemporary public health achievement. So again, we see the FCTC being mismanaged and going away from its core purpose, which again brings us back to, should it be reformed? Carry on.
All right, now, this is my thing, and this is what I've said multiple times. I mean, there used to be a time when I said, let's get rid of the treaty, it's crap. But no, the treaty itself is not the problem. Yes, it was never future-proofed, and yes, it needs to be amended. The treaty itself is not the problem, it's the interpretation, and the interpretation is coming from the people who are in control. That's why we have these problems, because if you look at the treaty, there's a lot of good stuff in there. okay? And maybe some of it doesn't include nicotine per se, okay? But the treaty itself as a document is a good document. It's not a living document because it hasn't been updated. The problem is the interpretation of that document.
Yeah, exactly right. I mean, a lot of people say we should scrap the FCTC treaty, but it would have to be re-ratified by all those countries, and you wouldn't have harm reduction in it, I expect. But there you go. So we'll talk about World No Tobacco Day, because Ignacio mentioned it. World No Tobacco Day this year happened and really didn't talk about tobacco very much. It just talked about nicotine alternatives. And one of the main point of the World No Tobacco Day was to ban flavours. They've just said, didn't they? They need to ban flavours in every country across the world. Not just vaping on every product. They need to ban flavours.
Children to do it.
Yeah, and use the children article. But what's the Irish government done about that? Because we know that they've been making the same noises.
Well, since this current government had been elected, they've basically done very little. The one thing they had coming from their previous run was the nicotine inhaling products bill, and they're determined to get that done. They probably won't get it done before the summer, but it's coming in the autumn. The heads are already written up, and the wording is interesting, especially on the flavours one. The wording is that only flavours called tobacco may be marketed. And I thought, what the hell? So you dig a little further and you find that the rationale is that it's too damn expensive to test every flavour. So instead of actually banning flavours, they're just going to insist they're all called tobacco. Now, they also want the plain packaging for the product. So everybody's tobacco will be called tobacco. There won't be a tobacco 1, 2, and 3, because let's face it, I'm opening a factory, blueberry flavoured, called tobacco B. You've gotten the heads up now, right? It's unthinking and it's rushed through. It's being done to say we did something. If they really wanted to restrict flavours, they should start with the presentation of the flavours. Let's get rid of a name like Tutti Frutti Totti Wooty. Let's just insist that it's called blueberry, or let the flavour be the description. Let the company product be the name. Do not go into, the cartoon images. There has been some dreadful marketing. Probably the big driver behind this has sadly been disposables. These turned up on the shelves that used to be filled by fidget spinners, and vapes left. They went from the supermarket, the convenience store, and they went into the pound shops and the mobile phone shops, and then the moral panic really kicked in. Again, we're being told, but they're a gateway. They need to check that, because the smoking rate is dropping, and it's been dropping. It had dropped the largest drop ever was up to 2017. And by 2019, a valley happened. And then the smoking rate rose. It did not occur to them that the huge negative publicity against vaping at the time caused that rise. No, it was the previous rise in vaping that caused the rise in smoking. That's sort of faded now, and we're back down to the 17% smoking rate. We get another round of vaping must be stopped. You get the impression that they resent smoking reducing.
Well, it's their job. And I think what they resent is that we're doing their job for them, that we don't need them. I mean, it's the same what you were saying before. Why aren't we celebrating these kids not smoking? I mean, New Zealand's negligible smoking rate. Yes, the vaping rate peaked, and now it's starting to plateau out and come down. Why are we not celebrating the wins? Why are we spending so much time being so negative and creating a problem where it doesn't exist? Oh, wait a minute. I know why they're doing that. Because that maintains their relevance.
Well, I think a lot of it is the fact that the FCTC was originally set up to counter the huge lobbying and financial power of the tobacco companies. I mean, they identified that it was very hard to implement tobacco control against that. But that's seemingly created a paranoia there that everything that
It's become more about knocking down the tobacco companies
Yeah.
than actually doing anything about public health. Yes.
yes, it has.
Tom, I'm hearing what you're saying about changing names and stuff. I'm going to tell you this, in Canada, we just gave it all up. We were just like, oh, what do we need to stop them? Let's remove the names. We'll create a naming convention. That wasn't good enough. We are going to remove cartoon characters, which I get. I agree with that. I really don't need a square, whatever that guy is, the sponge guy. Then we went to, let's lower the nicotine concentration. Okay, it's okay. No one needs. You know what? We don't know what anyone needs. So now we're at 20 milligrams. We kept giving and giving and giving. Don't give up anything. Because these people, and you're trying to figure out what they're around for, I guess they're around to get, we're there for their entertainment at this point. I really think the anti-tobacco people in Canada would have nothing to do if it wasn't for consumer advocacy movements, because we keep them on their toes all the time. We can't keep giving up stuff. We can't keep allowing people to say you're 5.3. I should be allowed to go to a public health conference and not have my ticket removed. I should be allowed to go to the Heart and Stroke, the Ottawa Heart Model for Smoking Cessation, that is funded by my government, without someone saying 5.3. Dude, you're a not-for-profit. You are not a government agency. And this is Canada. I'm so tired of giving stuff up. I'm so tired of saying, well, if we give up the disposables now. No, disposables work. Everything works. Every single human being in this world is so unique. And how they smoke and how they quit smoking needs to be their choice, not anyone else's.
Well, that's what
I'm
we
not
fight
gonna-
for, access and choice. People need to have access and choice because it isn't Brave New World and we're not all alphas and betas and deltas. Everybody's different.
Okay, I just saw we had someone who wanted to ask a question in the audience. Do you
Can I say something before? We have talked a lot about banning flavors, but we haven't talked about other trick that they are using to ban or to not be able the category to work, that it's taxes. Yeah. They are using it as a weapon. And I will just give some examples. You have the example in Ecuador, where the taxes for vaping liquids and devices, it's 150% plus the normal tax. But here in Poland, we have a situation that shows how crazy can be the things. Here in Poland, the Bloomberg power, but also the power of PMI have been great, doing lobby. So actually now in Poland, buying a single bottle of e-liquid of 10 milliliters, only in taxes we are paying 18 PLN. It doesn't matter if I put it in euros, it's a lot anyway. It's barely for 4 euros only in taxes. But for a full pack of heat from Philip Morris, the full tax for this kind of tobacco, it will be 2.6 PLN. So you can see how lobby it's working, that the taxes that are still rising here in Poland for vaping are hundreds, no, not 100, but like 10 times more than tobacco, heating tobacco.
Ignacio, I'm going to tell you, we own the title. Like in Canada, I guess we want to figure out how to become number one. 189% taxation on vaping products, just right across the board. 189% when our tobacco taxes are, again, high, because, again, we need to be number one, 181%.
Australia wins, sorry.
Oh,
Yeah,
no, sorry.
Australia
Oh,
wins.
no.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah, yeah,
okay,
they
you
win
can
by
have
far.
it. You can have it.
Sorry.
Let's hear this question from the audience here first.
So, Clive Bates, I was involved in the early stages of the FCTC from 1999 to 2003. And the focus really wasn't on the industry. The focus was on how do you generalize evidence-based tobacco control measures focused on ill health, really. 8 million people a year dying, maybe 1 billion in the 21st century was the numbers that we were dealing with at the time. And everything was about that. How do you stop smoking, really? And there wasn't really any of these new models. What I think has happened is that a new value proposition has been created, and it's been enormously successful for the FCTC. It's been backed by Bloomberg, who believes it completely. I don't believe he's insincere. And it's very attractive to governments. And it's different to the original purpose of the FCTC. And I want you to react to this, which is that the job of governments and the FCTC is to protect youth from predatory industries who are marketing an addictive product to keep them as customers for life using attractive flavors and persuasive marketing, okay? That's the value proposition, and that works well in politics. And that is essentially taking the place of the earlier. So when we say, you know, they're not following the science or whatever, it's because they're thinking differently about the problem that they are trying to solve. So I want to know from the panel, what's your reaction to that framing of the problem for the FCTC and how you address that?
Let's look at the science behind that. We do have some in Canada. Why do kids vape? There's a study out, and you're looking at the science, and some of the reasons are mental health. It's not flavors. Flavors is not number one. So I would ask the FCT is it marketing? Are the same kids that would be abusing energy drinks, which is, again, high caffeine? Are they the same ones that are using nicotine? Because it's easier to consume for them instead of, you know, whacking back 10 Red Bulls to be able to stay up at night. So we need to dig in, and then the science is starting to be there. But we can't just say we're going to protect youth from marketing. Wait a second. There are reasons why kids are attracted to nicotine. And yes, flavors do help. And then you're also looking at a whole wide of things of other things. Like this is, to me, too broad and too blame-based. There are reasons behind it. We can blame it. Like, why do kids, like, I mean, why are people homeless? Oh, that's so broad. We need to protect homeless people from drugs. How are we going to do that if we don't understand why they use drugs? How are we going to protect youth from these marketing? Most countries have really strict marketing regulations that are regulated already. Kids are getting these products. There's the internet. I just really think is that they can still use science, and the science is there. If they really cared, they would dig deeper to figure out why kids are using substances. But then a new study came out saying that nicotine isn't as addictive in the forms that we're consuming it now. I don't know. I just saw it now. But again, that's kind of my thing.
Okay, we're running short on time, so I want to ask one question. Have short answers only, please, from all of you. Based on the failures of, and we're going to go to David to finish up for us. Based on these failures that we've all been talking about, obviously a complete reform of the WHO and FCTC is needed. But I want to get you to talk about, and again, short answers. Above all, consumer voices must be heard on the subject of this reform. So how do we get consumers into the conversation, Ignacio? And as quickly as you can. 1 minute, 2 minutes possible.
We need the consumers to show themselves, not only the representative. We need to be able to show the FCTC that there is a bunch of people behind. They can block us as the ones that are talking for others, but in the moment that they realize that those others are real, I think it's the only way, and it's the way that we used in Chile, to let them know that they were there. Just a little thing that we did in one of the moments, in 2 days, 9,000 users sent emails to all the deputies of the Commission of Health. That was what really opened the door and the minds of the politicians, because also when they see that they got 9,000 emails in 2 days, they said, oh my God, how many votes are hidden there? So I think that's something. How to do it, I don't know in COP stuff, but I think it's the only way.
Education.
Education.
Education. Education equals to empowerment. When you feel empowered, you're going to engage with whoever, but you can't feel empowered if you don't have that information. And I think in Canada, we're lucky that we have people who help us learn.
Maria kind of said, but take a microphone. I know we're both Greek, you poor people. I think it's education, and I think the education has to start from the ground. I mean, we can sit here and try to educate lawmakers, and we can sit here and try to educate health people, but really what we have to do is talk to the person next to us. We have to actually live and explain what we do in such a way that we're inclusive. I mean, this is how New Zealand got where New Zealand got. We'd sit there and there'd be people who smoked. So yeah, corrected myself for you. People who smoked, and we wouldn't castigate them, we wouldn't stigmatize them. What are you doing? And this is it has to be human. I think that's what I'm trying to say, is we need to humanize this. We can sit here and complain and bitch and moan about, the FCTC does this, or this Bloomberg does this, but ultimately what we have to do is we have to maintain our humanity and at the same time maintain our authenticity. That's how we have to approach it. That old adage, harm reduction average, nothing about us without us. How do we get the consumer voice heard? How do we reform the FCTC so that we are allowed to discuss these things with them?
They may talk to us eventually. I'm not sure they care either way. The old saying is speak truth to power. I would say don't bother. They know the truth. That's why they have the power. The people we need to talk to, as Nancy said, are our friends, our neighbours, the kitchen table conversations. The allies we need are not other harm reduction advocates. It's the people who don't care at the moment, the non-smokers. It's all them. There was a public consultation on that nicotine bill I mentioned. 87% said tear it up, throw it out, it's rubbish. The minister came on radio and said it had huge support. And then he corrected himself, from the people who care about children.
Okay, so as I said, we will be holding our Conference of the People in Geneva in November, and it was David's idea, so do you want to just tell us about what's going to happen there? Hopefully on the subject of reform as well. We're hoping to push reform. This is why we're doing it.
Well, let's be clear. The FCTC is at a crossroads. Let's look at what happened in Panama, not with our conference, but with the World Health Organization's conference. They were in disarray. It was supposed to happen in November of 2024. They had to postpone it until November of 2023. We had it in February of 2024. This movement is not at a crossroads. The FCTC is at a crossroads because countries started speaking out. St. Kitts and Nevis, they were very bold to push back against the World Health Organization. It took a lot of guts for them to do that. And now we see that this conference will be in Geneva. They're not doing that because they want to go home and have a homecoming. They're doing that because no other country wanted to host this meeting. And I think it's because of the education that we've been doing. And let me just step back for 1 second. Someone asked me how long the Taxpayers Protection Alliance has been involved in harm reduction. And it's been for 14, 15 years. But myself, I've been involved in this actually going back, and I didn't realize it, since the mid-1970s, when my dad was smoking 3.5 packs of cigarettes a day, would put me and my brother into the car, roll the windows up, and smoke as he drove us to school. And he would wake up with a cigarette and go to sleep with a cigarette. To me, that's when tobacco harm reduction started. I didn't realize it because I was 10 years old in the mid-70s, but that's when it started. And what we found out in Panama, when we brought together the Conference of the People, we had consumers, we had policy experts, the Tax Foundation, National Taxpayers Union, they were there. We had physicians, we had doctors, and all of a sudden the World Health Organization was put on notice, is that people are watching and people are talking. And I think that's the goal of the next one in Geneva, is to expand that message and to say, we are watching, and we are not going to take this sitting down. And I think that's the brilliancy of this conference, but also other conferences that talk about these new products. And getting back to the FCTC, they were not prepared for what the private sector was going to do with these products. You look at Japan and heated tobacco, how that one product has changed that country. You look at pouches, how it's changed in the U.S. Pouches in the U.S. are exploding. Tucker Carlson started his own line of pouches. And I think it's amazing to see what the industry is doing, and the FCTC is still stuck at 20 years ago. But that's what government is. Government gets stuck in a mentality of 20 or 30 years ago, and they haven't moved forward, and it's to the detriment of taxpayers and consumers.
Amen. Yeah. So, we've run out of time, but thanks very much for everyone on the panel: Ignacio, Maria, Nancy, Tom, and David. And thanks everyone for attending and listening. Thanks very much. Bye.